And Nintendo is just such a disappointment right now. Strangely enough, one of the nicest things that I felt Nintendo did last year was they announced that there would be an April Direct to unveil the Switch 2, and they did that all the way back in January. And I think part of the reason they did that is because it was kind of leaked already. Everybody knew what the Switch 2 was going to be by the time they actually unveiled it, but it calmed things down for a few months. There were obviously still discussions about the types of games that were coming, but them being straightforward, saying when the presentation was going to be, well, like 3 months in advance, at the very least, it allowed people to have just kind of a clear idea of when they were going to be getting some kind of announcement, or in this case, the full presentation. And it was mostly nice for the sake of the online community, because the years leading up to that January reveal where they announced the Direct would be in April were just exhausting. Rumors, leaks, lies, deception. People arguing, people disagreeing, people begging, people pleading. In my opinion, it was one of the worst times to be a Nintendo fan trying to enjoy the online discourse. But then when Nintendo finally unveiled the Switch 2 and they announced the Direct would be up, I don't know man, it just felt like there was a giant weight collectively lifted off the shoulders of the entire Nintendo fandom. And you could kind of feel how quickly it turned back around since the Switch 2 launched until now. From June and until now, there has been discussion about an upcoming Nintendo Direct. Because people want to understand what they're going to be playing and what they're going to be enjoying, and those that have not bought a Nintendo Switch 2 yet want to understand what's going to be available so they can determine if they want to buy the console or not. But Nintendo realizes that the less aware people are about their launch schedules and their game release schedules, the more likely they are to just buy their console, subscribe to Nintendo Switch Online, and mindlessly spend money waiting for the big reveals, or the big releases. So then what ends up happening is you create just a very unhealthy, toxic-filled online environment with nothing but just a typical misinformed rhetoric and lies and deception, non-existent rumors, fake leaks, all so that it could generate some kind of weird hype online, all of which is being led by influencers, whether they be on YouTube or Twitter. But the fault lies in Nintendo and in their lack of communication, their lack of respect for their fandom, and their bizarre decision-making. The fact that they felt it was the right idea to have this Nintendo Treehouse today just highlights how little they care about each and every person that is supporting them and has supported them over the last 20 or 30 years. Today's Treehouse was a boring letdown. I know, I watched the whole thing, and it's not even a boring letdown because of the games themselves. I'm sure there's a population of people that are ecstatic about what was shown today, but the people aren't clamoring for what they displayed in today's Treehouse. They want announcements, they want news, they want a press release. It makes no sense that today's Treehouse was not a Direct with a Treehouse following it like they've done in the past. What does make a lot of sense is the fact that they decided to air the Treehouse at 5 p.m. after the US stock market closed and prior to the Japanese one opening. Because if you were following the chat for that Treehouse, it was getting ugly in there. And the only reason that live chat is as toxic as it is because the most enthusiastic of Nintendo fans want a Direct. They want to know what's coming out this year. And more importantly, they want to know what the new big games that Nintendo has down the line is for the Switch 2. Because with this lack of transparency, it's making more people realize that they bought the console way too early, which obviously is exactly what Nintendo wanted all along. I was watching the Treehouse. I was seeing the first half of it show the multiplayer mode for Super Mario Bros. Wonder. First, they showed off a Toad Builder thing, which is like little mini challenges that you can play locally with up to 4 friends. And then they showed a little bit of like an online VS mode. There was nothing learned in what was displayed. All of this is pretty much exactly what people have expected since they did the first overview trailer on it. There will be a crowd of people that appreciate this, but most people will be wondering why there aren't just more worlds and more levels created for Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Quite frankly, the type of multiplayer experience that was showed off today is no different than something that a simple indie game would offer. It's something that I think could potentially be enjoyed with a small group of friends, especially on a couch co-op game night. It's something that I would have enjoyed with my friends and family. But it's not something that screams Nintendo Switch 2. It's not something that screams the bonus mode in an $80 port. In order to enjoy everything that the Super Mario Bros. Wonder portion of the Treehouse was sharing, you're looking at either spending $450 or $500 on a Nintendo Switch 2, plus $80 on Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Now, potentially, you could have already purchased Super Mario Bros. Wonder, but you still spent $60 on that, and you're adding $20 to this, which equals $80. So assuming you bought the bundle for the Switch 2, that's $580, times the average tax rate, $620.60. And when you look at this add-on content, that has been a fairly sizable portion of everything that's been advertised since the Switch 2 came out until now, this doesn't scream jump into a Switch 2 and buy an $80 game to anybody. If anything, it screams, why can't Switch 1 owners purchase this add-on content themselves? Like, I'm not opposed to additional content being hidden behind the next gen, but it should look and feel like it belongs on the next gen. You know, I was kind of thinking about the other day how similar some of these early launch games feel in comparison to the Switch 1. Right, you had Breath of the Wild for the Switch 1, you had the Switch 2 edition of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom for the Switch 2. Bonanza is supposed to be the Odyssey game. ARMS, Drag X Drive, Mario Kart, Mario Tennis, and Mario Tennis. And it may have been all the way later in January 2019, but pretty early on in the Nintendo Switch 1's life, they did release New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. A Wii U port that sold almost 20 million copies. Almost 30 million if you count the original version on the Wii U. So I don't know, it kind of makes sense to me that they would speed it up a bit, and instead of porting over the Wii U version onto the Switch like they did last gen, they're basically doing the upgrade pack, which is effectively a port of the Switch 1 version on the Switch 2 for this gen. It just feels very unimaginative and lacks the excitement that you would usually feel with a Nintendo console, especially with the software that's coming out on a Nintendo console. At least when they were doing this last time, the Switch itself, the whole hybrid nature of it, was the innovation that made it worth it. When you were getting the Switch, you were getting a proper HD 2D Mario game on the go. This time around, when you're looking at the new 2D Mario game in HD, that being Mario Wonder is being ported over to the next Switch, you're not getting a performance boost, and the display is not really all that much different either. And the portability can be done on the Switch 1. So in this case, the only thing they have to sell to you is the multiplayer mode that they're adding for Wonder. And I don't know, man, for me, they're not doing a good job selling it. Because it's not worthy of a new console generation. It's not worthy to be a year one release that's hyped up part of Mario's 40th anniversary. Which is a recurring theme here, because the last thing was a Mario Tennis game that just did not seem like it was anything better than Aces. And prior to that was overpriced ports of the Galaxy games. And it's just making everything feel so flat, so unexciting. Imagine the excitement today if instead of a Treehouse, they announced the next 3D Mario. Even if it wasn't coming out for another year, maybe even 2 years. Just a little clip of something with a logo. You know, something to make the people excited. Or a Smash Brothers logo. But no, instead we keep getting like these Switch 2 editions that are just boring. And it's a concern because you know that if you're getting a Switch 2 edition, you're probably not going to be getting a new 2D Mario anytime soon. But look, ultimately, when I was watching the Mario portion of this thing, if it was being sold as a standalone little minor project that Nintendo did for 20 bucks, whether or not you own the base game, there's potentially an argument for it. It would be a little bit overpriced, but probably enough. If it was DLC that you could buy on the Switch 1, I'd feel like that 20 bucks would be a little bit too expensive, but at the very least, it's additional content for a fairly good game on the Switch 1. But the fact that it's being locked behind a brand new console, but it effectively offers nothing to make it seem like it's worthy of being presented on this new console, it just feels kind of dumb, for a lack of a better term. Like, imagine Fire Red and Leaf Green. Like, it's already controversial enough as it is, but imagine they decided to lock that behind being Switch 2 only, and how controversial of a decision that would be. I'm kind of getting the same vibes here for the Switch 2 edition for Mario Wonder, and quite frankly, I've been getting that same vibe with most of the Switch 2 editions, if not all of them, since the console launched until now. It's the reason you can't call them DLCs, because you can't buy them on the Switch 1 version where the downloadable content would actually apply. You can only buy them grouped in with the Switch 2 version, which is basically with the improved frame rate and /or resolution if you're lucky. But yeah, if anybody was looking for something exciting to come out of the Treehouse to find out that Super Mario Bros. Wonder was actually going to be worthy of holding the banner for Mario's 40th anniversary, I definitely don't think you would have found it in the Treehouse, and you're probably lucky if you skipped it. Now, before I transfer over to Pokopia or whatever, I genuinely was wondering while watching this thing, who these Treehouses are for. Like, Nintendo games in general obviously obviously they are presented as if they are for children. They still offer enough of them so that people of all ages can enjoy them, but they go for the family-friendly vibes. But those are the games that you're purchasing. The Treehouse itself feels like it's being catered towards a crowd that is not watching the Treehouse. Like, while I'm watching this thing, the way these people are communicating to the camera, you would assume that they were presenting this for somebody between the ages of 3 and 5 years old. But I don't imagine anybody under the age of, oh gosh, I don't know. I want to say 10, but it might not even be 15 years old is tuning into this. Shoot, it might be 20-year-olds and up. Like, it's okay that the games are marketed towards kids, but the Treehouse, kids are not watching this. It almost felt like they were trying to be Miss Rachel. And I don't think it's always been like this, because I've seen previous Treehouses, and I've watched previous directs, and I even remember some of the live ones that they would do after E3, where they'd be sitting on a couch together and playing, like, Super Mario Party, for example. Like, they were still playing games that were more or less catered towards the family-friendly environment, basically kid-friendly. But when I was watching those, I didn't feel like I should be in diapers in order to enjoy it. I don't know, it might be a nitpick on my end. Then I have no issues with the cast themselves, it's just the way that it's being presented. And I'm assuming it's not their decision to present it that way. Heck, even thinking back to some of the earlier Switch 2 Treehouses, I don't remember them sounding this bad, but whatever, that's besides the point. Although it is kind of related, because then you get to Pokemon Pokopia, Pokemon Copium. Look, I'm trying to do this as nice that I can, because I am not a fan of judging people for the kinds of games that they enjoy. What I can say for certain is I'm watching the Pokemon Pokopia stuff and I'm like, this is definitely not for me, and I would feel awkward playing this game. Like, at that point, I might as well go sit and play with building blocks with my daughter. But I don't know. I don't know if a guy is in his mid-30s is exactly the target audience for this, so I won't judge people that enjoy this stuff. Even if you are in your mid-30s and this is your thing. You do you. And clearly, there is a massive crowd for these types of games. Since I do not play these games, I cannot delve deep into how good or how bad Pokemon Pokopia is, especially since I'm going based off of what they show in the Treehouse and I don't actually have my hands on it. It looks simpler than Animal Crossing, I can say that much. Although honestly, it looks like they actually stole some assets from Animal Crossing, including like the menus. But I don't know if it's the model of the main character or just that general bland Pokemon art style that we've been seeing since the launch of the Switch 1 that has kind of looked lifeless and lame for the better part of the last decade, but something about it just felt very cheap and unwelcoming. And it just looked a lot more shallow than something like Dragon Quest Builders, for example. To put it simply, it looked like a mobile game. And it actually looked like a hell of a good mobile game. I genuinely think there is a massive audience for this type of title. However, at least in the States, I don't think that audience buys a Switch 2 and then a $70 game on top of that in order to get this experience. Obviously, this game would basically have to take the world by storm in order to reach even half of Animal Crossing's success, so I don't expect it to reach Animal Crossing's success, nor should that be the expectation from anybody, because Animal Crossing's success was very much inflated not only by the fact that there were actual Animal Crossing bundles with the Switch Lite for $200, but obviously a whole frickin' worldwide pandemic. It's not the only reason Animal Crossing on the Switch 1 got as big as it did, but it did help it get there. But a very big reason why that game got as big as it did is also how little it costs to pick one up. Even if there was a worldwide pandemic repeated today, you wouldn't see those same kind of sales if instead of a $200 Switch Lite or a $300 regular Switch, somebody had to spend $450 to $500 on a Switch 2 plus $70 on a game as opposed to $60. And it's very off-putting to look at Pokemon Pokopia and realize that there are people that are celebrating this title given all of the baggage around it. I mean, honestly, by this point I should not be surprised, but I genuinely am. I look at this game and I see the quality of that one mobile game where everybody's like fighting 3-on-3 or whatever it is. Is it called Pokemon Unite, I think? You could tell I haven't really played that game. I think I downloaded it when it first came out and that was it. But I look at the quality of that game and the quality of Pokemon Pokopia and I don't see a stark difference. And that one is free to play on mobile. Now I'm guessing there are enough people that spend way too much on that game where Nintendo has more than made up what they needed for the free to play. And I'd wager that's a very big reason why they're okay with charging $70 and making it a Switch 2 exclusive, because they know that the enthusiast crowd that's willing to spend money on cheap Pokemon games will spend money on cheap Pokemon games. A lot of money. Honestly, I'm looking at some of the character models and art for Pokemon Unite. I might be crazy in saying this, but I think it actually genuinely looks more pleasing on the eyes than Pokemon Pokopia. It just looks so bland and soulless. I legitimately don't know how successful this game is going to be, but I know it will be successful, and I know a lot of that success, if not the vast majority of that success, is going to be carried by Japanese audiences. And it's not even like it's going to be cheaper in Japan. I mean, it'll be cheaper over there than what we're paying here in the US. Like it's whatever, 89, 80 yen, which is the equivalent of like $57. But I'm talking in comparison to the other games. So the only game that's actually 89.80 in Japan right now for the Switch 2 is Mario Kart World. Bonanza and Mario Tennis Fever, the equivalent of the $70 games over here, are $79.80 over there. But to the Japanese audiences, they're basically selling them Pokemon Pokopia at the Mario Kart World price, that $80 price tag if they did it over here. And I think that actually goes to show just how much Nintendo expects Japanese audiences to eat this thing right up. If they had the same confidence in the Western markets, we would be spending $80 on that as well. But $70 is still no joke. They clearly do have a certain level of confidence because they are releasing this game, this first-party game, need I remind you, as a $70 game key card. So they are fully aware that it doesn't matter what the quality of this title is. It doesn't matter how it reviews. It doesn't matter of the uproar that we make about it. They are completely aware that the massive Pokemon fandom is just going to look up and see Squirtle and Bulbasaur and Charmander, and they're going to happily spend the money on this game, even if it is grossly overpriced for the amount of quality and effort that's on display today. But unfortunately, here is the reality. Not every single person wants to just have a Switch 2 edition of Mario Wonder, which is a single-player game with some tacked-on additional multiplayer content, nor is every single person out there A, a Pokemon fan, and B, a fan of cozy games. And while in a couple days from now there is going to be a presentation for Pokemon Gen 10, again, not everybody is a Pokemon fan. If Gen 10 is announced and it's the only Switch 2 exclusive title that's announced in the Presents on Friday, there is going to be a decent size of the fandom that's going to be disappointed because they still do not have an exciting game to buy on their Nintendo Switch 2. And if Gen 10 is going to be the only big title to come out this year, then this console is effectively only going to be appealing to casual audiences, Pokemon fans, and Mario Kart. And as we already saw in the last holiday season, especially in Western markets, the price point is way too high to appeal to that blue ocean audience. Nintendo needs some high quality output titles. Maybe Metroid Prime 4 was supposed to be that game, but even then that was a Switch 1 and a Switch 2 title. They need something for the hardcore gaming audience, because the only reason the hardcore gamers bought a Switch 2 in the first place is for those major blockbuster IPs. Bonanza only appealed to roughly 1/4 of the Switch 2 audience so far. For a Nintendo Switch 2 in its first year, that is not enough. And that game is the best-selling non-bundled title. They need to release something of the caliber of Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey or Smash Bros. Otherwise, with every passing month, this console becomes lamer and every single announcement suffers because people are waiting for the next big thing, and they've been waiting for it for a very long time. This Treehouse was completely unnecessary, but then again, at least at this point in time, the Switch 2 feels the exact same way.